Did I tell you Brian Chiwa went out to the march the other day and handed out a bunch of little handouts about the American Union?
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think I gave out about 100 of them.
Oh, nice. That's great.
So did you see any signups from that?
From California?
Yeah. I sent out emails too to my friends, but it takes a while for people to get it and take action.
Yeah, we had a San Diego, California, and a Vista, California
Oh, well, they might both be from.
over the weekend.
Oh, good. Yeah, I figured in March was a good place to hand out little announcements. And people were so glad to get it. It was like, oh, thank you. I've been wondering when somebody was going to do something like this. Hey, Eddie, what took you to Shanghai?
We moved to Shanghai from Beijing a couple years ago just for a change of scenery. But I moved to China in 2007 for the excitement and adventure. Yeah, I was single and straight out of college, and I just thought it would be an exciting place to be. So I just came to China and been here ever since. Yeah.
Are you married now?
Yes, married and two kids, two little kids. 2 and 4. Yeah.
I'm going to head and read the introduction just to get us into the mood of the spirit of being here together. And I'm so glad you all showed up. We're here to acknowledge our unity as individuals and form a more perfect union. This group is for practicing deliberative dialogue and nonviolent communication. Deliberative dialogue refers to a face-to-face method of public interaction in small groups of diverse individuals. Nonviolent communication is a place to start our study of how to come together as individuals. Nonviolent communication is natural giving. Natural giving is remembering to stay with the quality of giving moment by moment in any connection. It's easy to lose it. Instead, much of the time we play another game called Who's Right? It's a game where everybody loses. Consider a 3-part plan. 1, we'll support the current social political system reform. 2, shift the dependence on centralized representative government to individual sovereignty and personal responsibility. Build an alternative system of deliberative democracy, citizens' assembly, participatory budgeting, and digital voting. And 3, imagine a resource-based economy where we all live in shared abundance. The blueprint for a better America is what we can do now. So I've asked Brian to read the purpose.
The purpose of the American Union is to deliver legislative solutions to many of the problems and issues that people want to see addressed through a duty-based framework inspired by the preamble to the Constitution. The Blueprint for a Better America is a legislative package with dozens of popular policies. This group will, 1, listen for the problems that people want to see addressed in America. 2, look to see if the blueprint helps advance solutions for them. 3, examine the other policies that are within the legislation and the problems they address. 4, recognize that not all issues are important to all people, but that we are stronger when we support each other. 5, listen for paramount objections where individuals have deal breakers inside the blueprint and would prefer politics as usual. And 6, build consensus that as a whole, this legislation can build a better America by ending poverty, ending mass incarceration, and ending the endless wars. And the time to act is now in the 2022 midterms.
Thank you, Brian. So tonight, there's 5 of us. I wrote it down this time. Last time, if it hadn't been for Nissan, I'd have been lost. Well, I was lost. I mean, if it hadn't been for Nissan, the meeting would have been lost. Okay, round 1, introductions, your name, your place on the planet, and your passion or current action. And I don't think we need to be too conscious of the time if the group is big. So I've been talking, so let's start with Susan.
Okay, I am in San Diego, California. not too far from Chihuahua. And I would like to read something to everybody that I wrote, and there's two versions. I'll read one version this time and maybe the other one next time. I rewrote the pledge. And on our Tuesday meeting, every time the leader has been reading it to us. Of course, yesterday I came late, so I didn't hear it, but he said he did. So I take his word for it. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the people of the United States of America, to preserving liberty and free will, to live in contentment and peace, unrestricted by injustice, prejudice, and pollution. To live in a country proud and free, where clean air, water, soil are rights, a priority, where people and climate are supported, not major corporations' greed. I pledge allegiance to the land that sustains us and to protect and preserve the life around us. I pledge to protect our biodiversity and prevent extinction and support the biodiversity that sustains us. And I have oh, wait, there's more. To those who stand and those who kneel, we support the way you feel. Our call for justice is at hand, for equality in our homeland. So I kept on rewriting it, so I may rewrite it yet.
That's really good, Susan.
Thank you.
See Chihuahua.
Well, I'm Chiwa and I live in Oceanside, here in the same house with TC, about a half hour up north of Susan. And I went to the Women's March this weekend, and I passed out. I'm going to share my screen. Anyway, I passed out these things. I made up this sheet, and I went down to the copy shop and used their free cutter and cut them out to tell people that we should unionize swing voters for bargaining power. And people really liked that. I handed out about 100 of them, and a couple of people I think signed up because Brian just looked it up. And there were 2 people from North County here who probably signed up from that. So that's like probably about maybe a 2% sign up. That's not too bad for a one touch.
That is
It was-
good, but was that on recycled paper?
No, it was on free paper that I was given. I have a whole bunch of paper because my friend gave me a lot of paper.
Show it to me
Well,
again,
when
Chihuahua.
you wrote, when people run out of paper, I hope they consider getting, sorry for the interruption, getting any paper good that you use from either hemp,
Not bamboo. No,
Oh,
bamboo
good,
takes too much
Chihuahua.
water.
Okay, so from hemp or recycled paper.
Yeah.
And places like Amazon sell it in bulk, so you can get it almost the same price as the other stuff, and you're really paying more for the other stuff, and you don't realize it because we're losing too many trees that way.
How long do I got to hold this up to?
No, I saw it. It was good. It's great.
Oh.
The first time you showed it, you still had your screen share on. I turned it off.
Oh, okay, okay. Anyway, I got a really good reception
Oh,
from the people that I handed it to, who were all strangers to me. And they were all like, wow, somebody's doing something about this. This is great. Thank you. So if anybody else wants to do that, you know, to go, when you go someplace, have something you can hand out, you can expect to be well received, as long as, you know, you're not among Republicans. And
so let's just do it. at
Well,
the
you know,
weekend.
even among Republicans, there are some of them that are open-minded.
yeah, there are some, maybe. I
Some,
guess,
like 1%. No, well, it's probably higher than that.
Okay, Brian, let's hear from you.
Okay. No, I'm here. I'm just running around. Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks so much. I heard that you passed up there, that you were passing something out, but I didn't know what it was. So thanks for showing the card. Very creative. What am I doing, TC? Just introduce.
Name, place on the planet and what's your passion? I don't know if you have a passion or not.
Oh, what do you mean? He's a very
No,
passionate
I'm
guy.
looking for, yeah, I'm a passionate guy based in Fayetteville, Carolina.
Okay, Eddie,
Hey everyone, I'm Eddie. I'm in Shanghai. My passion lately is creating UBI through community currency and mutual aid.
UBI.
That's yes, universal basic income. So the economy without universal basic income creates unnecessary poverty and unnecessary scarcity. And there's a paradox in that people don't have enough income to spend. But as a result of not having enough income to spend, other people, when they are trying to make some income, have difficulty making income because nobody else has money to spend with them, then they can't get money. And so you have in artificial poverty and scarcity in the economy, despite enormous levels of productivity growth and technological growth. So we're alleviating that situation with a digital community currency called MADAO.
So Brian, is that part of the way that you're going, that the blueprint attacks poverty?
Parallel paths. So the easiest way to alleviate everything would be for the US government to do it through Brian's blueprint for a better America. But just in case that takes a while to get here, the MADAO project does not require the government to help. We can simply do it as a community of people and with the community economy without requiring the assistance of the government.
How do we do that?
We so if you're interested in getting involved, there's a server. TC is in the economy, and Brian a little bit also. And you get, when you sign up, you get a UBI which is currently set at 50 MADAO per month, and you trade with other people. So like when TC wants some advice with his Deliberative Democracy project, sometimes he calls me up and says, Eddie, can I use you for an hour as a sounding board? And for I don't know, 40 MADAO or something. And I say, okay. So I help him with this project for an hour as a sounding board. And then he pays me 40 MADAO. And then when I need help with something, then I might call somebody else. There is a lady in the community who has been a sous chef in a restaurant. And so I'm trying to upgrade my cooking skills. And so I pay her for like recipes and meal plans and help, improving my ability to feed my family well, by cooking. Yeah.
So it's sort of like a barter club for which you have an initial $1,500.
Yeah, an initial 50 MADAO per month right now.
Oh, per month.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and as from the economics of it, the more activity we get, the higher that UBI can actually go. And I've calculated that we could get up to at probably $1,300 per month. $1,300 per month is possible in the current economy. In the current wider economy, if we can get the MADAO economy to grow. Yeah.
okay,
If
thanks.
people use it enough,
Did you get all your questions answered or?
More or less, yeah.
Okay, well, that brings me around to my turn. I'm TC. I'm a retired carpenter in Oceanside, California. And my passion this week
Oh,
Here's my passion this week. I made this, can you see this?
yeah.
All right, so this is the collaborative reform server that I'm making. And if you look on the left side in the column, you see all the channels, text channels. So there's a general channel where we can chat to each other. And then there's Action for Happiness, American Union, Black Visitors Collective, Center for Political Action, Copiosis, Cyrus Jansen, Deliberative Democracy, and it goes on and on and on and on. So these are all the people and groups that I know of right now that are making a difference that I'm following. And I'm hoping that they'll kind of cross-pollinate here. But that's what I'm up to for now.
Well, that's cool. I was wondering what you meant by a server.
Yeah, I was glad I got to show it to you. All
These
right.
big words, you know.
Okay, round 2. Are there any lingering thoughts from last week? Is there anybody that can remember last week?
Yeah, right.
I don't hear anyone responding. I think Nissan says going once, going twice, going 3 times. Round 3, new business. Does anyone have a burning desire to share, to clear before we start the dialogue? Then we're at round 4, and we are going today, we're going to do section 112 called Qualified Immunity Reform. And we have a video for this, and we'll watch that now.
All right, section 112. Now we're getting into the meat of this and reforming qualified immunity. Let me just recap the history of this real quick. So after the Civil War, there were civil rights violations going on in the South. And so the Republicans to address this, and they passed a statute. It was known as the Ku Klux Klan of 1871 Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1871, the Enforcement Act of 1871. And it, in simple terms, it gave individuals a right to sue state officers for damages to remedy certain violations of their constitutional rights. And this was, in place for almost about 100 years. And the language is pretty plain. It's like exactly what Congress, how they wanted it to work. But in the 1950s, the Supreme Court began to ask whether, well, maybe back in 1871, Congress meant that there'd be immunity for in certain cases. There are other examples of places where we give immunity to public officials, like legislators going to and from sessions of Congress while they're in session. It's a thing. And so the court was like, well, maybe this should apply to police officers too. And so they started doing that they recognized that in the end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s, forget the exact date. And then after that, they expanded it. So now qualified immunity means that essentially there's a rebuttable presumption that if your civil rights were violated, the officer had no idea that they were doing so, unless it is well established in law that they should have known better. And so that is what this specific language seeks to address. So what this section does is it adds to section 183 of Title 42 United States Code, which is the law that Congress enacted in 1871. It adds an exemption. It says, it shall not be a defense or immunity to any action brought under this section against a local law enforcement officer, such as the term is defined in section 111 of the George Floyd Justice Act, or in any action under any source of law. It shall not be a defense that the defendant could not have reasonably been expected to know whether or not his conduct was lawful. And we've got a bunch of examples of this where conduct that reasonable, rational adults would recognize as unlawful, police officers have been given qualified immunity. when they seized, you know, 200 and some $1,000 in money and rare coins during a search and only reported 50,000 and kept the difference. The rule gave them, the court gave them qualified immunity and said, well, it wasn't well established in law that they shouldn't steal. There's many examples of how qualified immunity has been abused. And it's important to recognize that reforming qualified immunity doesn't automatically make officers who violate civil rights, doesn't automatically make them liable for damages. All that it means is that a court, a jury, can hear the facts and decide. Qualified immunity stops that from happening. And so in order to establish justice, ensure that everyone has greater access to it, it's necessary to reform qualified immunity. The other thing that I just want to touch on is that qualified immunity applies to, under the court's interpretation, qualified immunity applies to lots of public officials. And I just want to point out that this reform only addresses law enforcement. So if there's a question, say, for example, you think the public school teacher who ordered your child to wear a mask was violating their constitutional rights. Right now, you can't, that teacher would have qualified immunity. And this, you know, from being sued over something like that. And this legislation wouldn't change it. It focuses on where we see the problem and tries to correct it.
So I have a question.
Okay, good, because you're first up.
So recently, there have been court cases where policemen were found guilty of violating people's rights. How could that have happened if they had qualified immunity? I don't understand.
Uh-oh. Brian, you're not coming through. Shiwa, will you ask me that question?
Yeah, how is it that there have been recent court cases where police officers were found guilty? I don't remember names, I'm not good at that, but they were found guilty of violating people's rights. How did that happen if they had qualified immunity?
Okay. Apparently, from my understanding, and I wish Brian could talk, but apparently the law was set in place back in the 1800s, right after the Civil War, and it was followed for a long time. And then the Supreme Court started tinkering around the edges and saying, well, maybe we can give them immunity. So it became cloudy. It became, I would say, intermittent is what you're seeing. Sometimes they're found guilty and sometimes they're not charged. And I think that even if we got this passed, it still wouldn't guarantee that they'd be charged, but it means that they can be charged if you want to bring charges. Whereas sometimes now, in some cases, you can't even bring charges. So that's what this is set up to address.
Yeah, I understand about that we can't, but I didn't understand how we did.
Well, it was the law for a long time until the 1950s.
No, how we did last year.
We could check Wikipedia.
Yeah,
Check it out,
Okay.
Eddie. Look it up.
okay.
Yeah. Qualified immunity. Okay. In the United States, we have qualified immunity as a legal principle that grants government officials performing discretionary functions immunity from civil
Oh,
suits.
maybe it's because
unless-
it's civil suits, and when they were tried on criminal grounds, maybe.
criminal, right? Yeah.
There you go, Chihuahua. You
That's
figured
it.
it out. There's two levels of the law. There's the civil law and the criminal law. The only thing is I don't know which one you could charge him under, whether it was civil law that they were, or criminal law that they were accountable. You guys are great. Chihuahua, did that, are we getting closer to the answer?
Well, I thought I kind of got my answer if that was what it was.
All right, Eddie, I think we got it. Well, it's your turn, Eddie. Brian, can you talk now? Did you get a better connection? All right, Eddie, you're up next. You had your screen on and you helped us out. Do you have any other questions about qualified immunity?
Yeah. I mean, my question is, yeah, I don't know, in great detail about, why the system is the way it is, in a similar spirit to Chiwa's question. And, I mean, my understanding is that cases of police brutality and, for instance, cases of police shooting, the conviction rates are just extremely low. If I remember correctly, it's something like 1 in 100, cases end with a conviction. And, it just, my impression is that there's too much space given to police to act in a way that is unjust, on balance. And so I don't know, I'm not an expert on how the system works, but it seems like it's not working right.
Okay, I'm going to risk a little bit of crosstalk here because we're a small group tonight. But Eddie, do you think that flows from the top down, where we have no accountability for our higher officials? I mean, it's like we have a lot of elected officials that have violated international law on many levels, and even violated some people's civil rights here in this country, and none of them are held accountable.
Yeah. Well, I think that both systems, both the international systems and the domestic systems, they respond to certain, they're dynamical systems. They respond to, the people within them respond to the incentives and their, abilities within the system. And it's not like, it's not exactly like someone is a designer, and this one person is able to see everything and design everything and then get, exactly what they wanted out of the system. I mean, it evolves through domestically, it evolves through law. So, then that depends on, what the incentives of lawmakers are. It depends on, how voting works, whether it works well or not. And then in the international system, we are still in a situation of, internationally, there is not very effective laws and norms. There are some laws and norms, but there's no one who can enforce them. The best that can be done is, if some very small countries in Africa are violating the laws, then sometimes the US and its allies says, that's no good, we're going to enforce on you. But if the US or maybe China or even Russia to some degree are violating these laws, right now there's no enforcement, there's no consequence to those violations.
Okay.
And so it's sort of a might makes right system right now. And I do think that it should be, that we should work towards a mechanism of enforcement, which is reasonable, just on the international level.
Thanks,
I think
Eddie.
we should criminalize war. Yeah.
Okay, Brian is in and out. I'm so sorry that Brian can't be with us fully. I'm going to add a little bit to that, in that my feeling of the paradigm that we're moving into is about personal responsibility and self-sovereignty. And I think that we as a culture, as a society, have become dependent on this top-down system and surrendered our personal power and our sense of power and become to believe that we're powerless and there's nothing we can do. And I think that in the near future, and I think it's happening faster than people realize, that more and more people are going to start saying, wait a minute, homie, don't play that game no more. And when enough people just refuse to participate in that top-down philosophy, we'll either create something else or I don't know what, I have no idea what will happen, but I do believe that people are waking up. Again, we got more videos to watch.
There's an interesting theory called structural demographic theory, and it works to explain the cycles and history of political and violent conflict. And the basic idea is that people react to their changing circumstances, and when you have periods of time where the common people are not doing very well, relatively speaking, and also the people at the top are also starting to sort of have some backsliding, then that tends to result in conflicts, and it even results in increases in crime. So I think, I don't know, that brought that up for me. To some degree, I think there's an underlying, maybe economics are, to some degree an underlying cause of many things, many problems.
Well, in a holistic world, it would be all interconnected. Brian, you want to try it now?
Are you guys able to hear me?
I hear you
Yeah.
now.
All right, sorry about that. I'm having internet issues, but I was able to dial in. Did Chiwa's question about qualified immunity get answered?
Not well enough. We thought
Well-
the difference. Go ahead, Chiwa.
We thought, we came up with something that said that the qualified immunity you were speaking of applied to civil law. And I thought, well, maybe the recent court cases where people have been found guilty, where police officers have been found guilty of mistreating people, maybe that was criminal law. Is that right?
Yes, the qualified immunity applies to civil law. So if you're trying to sue them for monetary damages. And then the other part of it is that there's like a rebuttable presumption that they don't know that they're doing something wrong and they're violating your rights unless there's been a court case that describes this exact same scenario, and then they're on notice that they can't do that anymore. So, for example, like if police officers chasing a suspect and they release and the suspect surrenders, and then they release their canine unit and have them bite the surrendered suspect. The first time that happens, they can say, well, I didn't know that, I shouldn't do that, and they get qualified immunity. But if the court says, no, you're not allowed to do that, then the second time that a law enforcement officer does that, then they would not have qualified immunity.
Any
And
law,
the,
any law enforcer or the same one?
In the same, whatever the district of the court is in. So if they get a ruling, in California, and then the same thing happens in New York, then, well, I didn't know that was the rule here. And so they could still get qualified immunity.
I see. Okay,
Does that explain it a little bit better?
yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Does everyone agree it's much better when Brian is here?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go. Let's do another video. Section 113, requiring training on duty to intervene. What do you say, Chiwa?
This, when this, does this mean that what Brian has put into the blueprint would require training on duty to intervene?
That's what we're gonna watch right now. Okay,
What?
we're gonna watch, that's what this video is
No,
about.
well, okay,
On a training on duty to intervene. And
You're
it
almost
will-
started
Section
over.
113 is this is the requiring on a training on duty to intervene. And it will establish a clear duty to intervene for law enforcement officers when they see the law enforcement officer using excessive force against a civilian. And so specifically, the Attorney General will establish a training program for law enforcement, and this will be mandatory for federal law enforcement officers. That every law enforcement officer goes through this training program, and make sure that everybody, there's no confusion. If you see another officer using excessive force, you have a duty to step in. You have a duty to intervene. If you see another officer kneeling on the neck of a man for 9 minutes, you have a duty to stop it. Now, this applies to federal law enforcement officers on passage of this act. But as far as going to the states, I'm encouraging the same thing in the states. This is where the burn grant leverage comes in. So beginning in the 2025 fiscal year, state or local government could not receive funds under the burn grant program unless they required their state law enforcement officers or local government law enforcement officers to complete this training program that the Attorney General is going to establish. So that's how we move this reform from federal level down into the states, by setting the proper example at the top and letting justice trickle down from there.
so
It's,
for the sake of clarity, right now, are federal law enforcement officers required to go through such training?
Brian.
They are?
No, I'm asking Brian.
No, not that
No.
I'm aware of.
Okay.
Eddie, your turn first this time.
Yeah, I would agree with these changes. Yeah, I would agree with these changes. And
Okay, Eddie's on board. Brian, do you want to add anything? Or was it Susan that goes? Wait a minute, Susan goes before Chiwa. Brian, do you want to say anything?
Who cares?
Really?
No, I think it's pretty simple and self-explanatory. But I'd be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Susan, do you have any questions?
I had some thoughts, but I think they were answered by what everybody said. So no, I don't have anything to add.
I find that common sense doesn't fit very well into our laws. Our laws don't wrap themselves very well around common sense, because it just seems to me like if you see somebody doing something, you should stop them, but that's just me. Okay, any more questions? Because now we can,
Well, I would say, okay, if I were a police officer, I can understand how a police officer might not want to interfere with another one up to a certain point, you know? It's like, well, I think it's excessive, but you know, who's to say that I'm right? So I can see their point of view, but I do think that they need training, therefore, to clarify what is okay and what isn't.
yeah.
thanks,
A-
Chiwa.
Anecdotally, you know, I've heard it said that police officers who intervene too much, you know, they get other police officers giving them a talking to about not doing that.
I'm sure that
So,
happens.
you know, yeah, there's other dynamics there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that goes into a deeper sense of reform that we need within the police attitude towards serving the people rather than treating them as an enemy. But
I would say that a continuation on that one, that I would like to see that expanded to somehow to the medical community, So that, because doctors protect each other, you know, if you file a malpractice suit and you're looking for other doctors to testify, it's pretty hard. You know, I'm sure that this probably happens in all of our professions.
Thanks, Chiwa. We're gonna have so many different new ideas in the future, so it's wonderful to hear.
Go on to
them.
the next one. I'm sorry. I'm very talkative today.
Well, and that's what we're here for. Okay, well now we're on section 114, part 1, restricting use of chokeholds. I think this one's a little bit longer. No,
Section
3 minutes.
114, titled Restricting the Use of Chokeholds. And it has 3 subsections, A, B, and C, and I'll just talk about each of those briefly. First is, this is the Eric Gardner Act. And for those who don't recognize the name, it was a man in New York City in 2014 that it was caught on tape as he was put into a chokehold, passed out on the ground, and left there until ended up passing away as a result. He was his cries of "I can't breathe" were ignored, and it led to a lot of protests. Basically, the police had been told, "Hey, go clean up this corner, go arrest some people," and despite there not being any evidence that Eric Garner had been doing anything, they tried to arrest him and choked him to death when he didn't comply. And so this section of the George Floyd Justice Act is titled in memory of him. So chokeholds, neck restraints, they fall into 2 broad categories. So the chokehold, which just restricts the airway when pressure is applied to the front of the neck, and then a stranglehold, which would restrict the blood to the brain when pressure is applied to the side of the neck. And these have been controversial for a long time. In fact, many states and many municipalities have banned them. In fact, the New York Police Department banned them back in 1993. Since then, they're banned in other states like Connecticut, Florida, New York, California, Wisconsin, Washington, in Washington, D.C. And so Part B of this section puts limitations on the eligibility for funds that states can get unless they have a law that prohibits law enforcement officers from using chokeholds or cartwright holds, as described in this act. And that provision would go into effect for the 2025 fiscal year. So they would have until the end of September 2024 to ensure that they had such law in the book in order to continue to qualify for the Burn Grant Program or the COPS Grant Program, as we talked about last week, which are some of the main ways that the federal government sends police funds to the states. Section C, subsection C of this act, it's that same prohibition on using chokeholds into section 242 of Title 18 United States Code. And it would make it a civil rights violation to use those.
I think it's my turn, or Brian, or is it? Well, it doesn't matter. I feel like this is one of these things that should be on the books, because right now I do believe they teach that stuff in school for them, how to use chokeholds and stuff. Or maybe not in the police, but I know there's certain defense classes that probably teach you stuff. I don't know anyway. So maybe I'll pass.
Is there another way to train officers to restrain people that they need to restrain without using chokeholds?
Then that question, Brian.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure what the answer is.
Because they haven't always used chokeholds, or have they? How long have chokeholds been used, do you know?
I imagine they've been around for a long time.
They
Uh,
could use a baton or just shoot the guy.
yeah.
Or taser them?
I'm sorry. I mean,
Where was your turn? Go ahead. You're feeling good tonight, huh? That's
So
great.
I think that was one of the questions that came up during this hearing was, couldn't a chokehold be less dangerous or less lethal than, shooting somebody, right? Or something else.
yeah.
And that's true. I mean, there definitely could be situations where that is the case. But the issue is that when you leave the loophole, like I think I said in the testimony, New York had already actually banned chokeholds. But then in the case of Eric Gardner, the officer said, well, I was afraid for my life or something like that to jump through that loophole to make it okay for him to use the chokehold anyway. And so by just banning them completely, it would take that option off the table so that the police wouldn't leave the loophole for them to use it. Does that make sense?
Mm-mm. No, I'm not sure I understand what you're saying.
I do. He's saying that it may actually, in reality, may be a better than shooting someone.
Yeah, that I got.
Okay. But if you leave it on the books, it just opens the door for them to say, well, I was in fear for my life,
Okay.
I had no choice but to act this way. And it opens the door for abuse. I think is what he was saying.
That's pretty much it. And again, what this section of the bill does is it establishes it as a civil rights violation. So it's not necessary. Yeah. So it makes it a civil rights violation that could come back and be held against the officer if they used one.
So what is a civil rights violation? Is that a felony, a misdemeanor? What are there different levels of civil rights violations? I'm sure.
Looking it up. He's searching the data file. His blueprint.
I'm looking through my paper copy.
It's about this thick.
Yeah. So the section of the law says that if you do any of these things, that you can be fined, imprisoned not more than 1 year, or both. So that would, I guess, would be a misdemeanor. You can't get one, unless doing these things, such as using the chokehold or carotid artery restraint, can be fined or imprisoned not more than 10 years, or both. So I guess it could be charged as a felony.
And if the person dies, then it could be manslaughter, right?
If death results from a violation of this section, then they could be fined, imprisoned for any term of years, or for life, or maybe sentenced to death.
That's the way it is now, or no, that's what's in the blueprint. Okay.
That's the existing law, and then what we're doing is we're adding to the list of unlawful acts. We're adding chokeholds to the list.
Oh, I see. That's the existing law for all actions by law enforcement officers.
Yeah, anybody who does these things under color of law.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, I think that's a kind of appropriate. I mean, if a police officer really feels that he needs a chokehold in order to be safe and et cetera, and nothing really bad comes of it, then he could be imprisoned for up to a year and have to pay a fine. That seems kind of right to me.
Okay, any
Um,
more? Go, Brian. It's
Nope, I don't have anything else.
all right, because we're at time and I want to connect before we go. I want to make sure that everybody knows how much I appreciate them being here, and this is something that we can do together, and I'm glad that you're showing up. And I'd like to go around the room and do our final thoughts and anything you want to add to tonight's meeting. And I'm looking at Susan.
I was listening to all this, but my final thoughts kind of have been straying to the book that I just started reading, which is called Half Earth. And I don't know, it's hard to say I don't like people being killed. It's not right, but if we lose humans, we're not going to lose the human race if we lose a few humans. I don't know, no matter which way I say it, it doesn't sound right. But the problem is we as humans are destroying the land out there, and there are so many species out there that have gone extinct or are in danger of extinction, that we need to pay attention to this too. And I haven't gotten to the point in this book where they're presenting any solutions, but one of the solutions is to have more land protected. We need to protect people from things like chokeholds, but we need to protect nature from being destroyed too.
Okay.
That should be just as criminal an act of destroying nature, because that affects us too.
Very much so. Thank you, Susan. Go to Chihuahua.
Well, I agree with Susan. And I also recognize that what we're discussing here is the blueprint. So I have found this to be a really good, informative and thought-provoking meeting on this topic, because this topic is important. And not everything can address everything. Nothing can address everything at once.
Thank you, Chihuahua. Eddie?
I wanted to say, I woke up this morning and I'm reading on Twitter that monkeypox is spreading internationally, and it apparently has a fatality rate of between 1% and 15%. So, if so worst case scenario, we might have another pandemic on our hands.
Oh no. What's it called? Monkeypox?
Monkeypox.
Yeah. So I don't know what we can do, but we sure didn't do very well last time around. Yes.
Boy.
Apparently smallpox vaccines are somewhat effective. So maybe do some research on smallpox vaccines. And I don't know, stock up, I guess. Do what you can. We may have that coming.
Okay. Brian?
Thanks, Eddie, for the cheerful final thoughts.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I want to thank you, TC, for holding these weekly meetings and taking the time to break down the blueprint and go through and kind of talk more about what's in it and give people a chance to discuss it. So thanks to Chihuahua and Susan and Eddie for being here as well.
Well, thank you, Brian, for all the work that you put into creating this. And I want to go again. I want to respond to Eddie's bad news with some worse news. I heard that the WHO, the World Health Organization, has got a treaty that they can declare a pandemic and take over the almost create a medical martial law where we have to have vaccines and passports and stuff like that. So I hope that doesn't happen. But beyond all that, what's coming to my mind is each time, the more the people in power try to hold us down, the more it backfires on them. And the people just, they pop back up. So I have a feeling that this isn't going to work for them either. So it's going to get the people more coming together to support each other. And then the other thing before we go is how would you feel if we actually could do this blueprint and get these things this year? That's too big of a question. I'll leave that go. I'll wonder about that myself. So anybody want to go around again?
I don't
I would
know.
like to get a copy of the blueprint. I don't think I have that. Do you think you could send that to me by email?
I will.
I think
don't
you sent that to me, didn't you, TC?
I think I did.
And the website for, what was it called? The American Union?
The American Union.
Yeah, the website for that. I see some links, but I'm not sure if it's the best one. Everybody go plant a tree.
All right.
And pick up trash so it doesn't go into the ocean.
TC, I know we're coming to the end of the meeting, but I just wanted to say I don't think the WHO has that ability to declare medical martial law. I mean, if you look at what happened with COVID, they weren't able to really control, nobody was really able to control anybody. People, went without masks, people, went out, even though they were trying to lock down. If anything, there has been not, it's not been possible really for anybody at the top to control people at the bottom. Even when, if they had a better degree of control like they had in China, we might have had better results. So I don't know. I don't think, I'm not worried about the WHO.
Okay.
Well, I want to give my sit down comedy answer to that, which is that I Googled the question, can the WHO declare international martial law? And I came up with a website that said, WHO can declare martial law in the United States. And I went to that website and it was a question, who can declare martial law in the United States?
Okay. Oh, who can? Yes. I get it.
I didn't find anything so far that said that the WHO can. And I did find one thing that says the UN has no power to declare martial law in sovereign countries.
Okay, so in a baseball game, who was actually, I think it was on second base. It wasn't
Who's
spelled
on first?
WHO. It was spelled, it was a Far East spelling of some sort. Vietnamese, I'm not sure. But who was on second base?
Oh,
No, who's on
Who
first?
was on second base?
who's on first?
What is on second?
What's on second, right?
No, who was on second base? He was.
Okay. Now
Okay.
we're happy and I feel good that we're happy. So I'm going to stop the recording.